Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the final meeting of the San Francisco Fire Safety Task Force, today being Tuesday, November 10th, 2015. It is about 10 after 10. And we also, it's my understanding, have Mr. John Bozeman on the line from BOMA. Good morning, Mr. Bozeman. Can you hear us?
Well, Mr. Bozeman, can you hear us?
I can, thank you.
Very good. Alrighty, so we do have a quorum, and with that, we will go ahead and move to agenda item number 3. I would ask everyone to turn their electronic devices to silent mode.
You can hear me, but I can't hear anything now.
Okay, I'll try and speak louder. Can you hear me now?
I can, thank you.
Okay. So I've asked our attendees to put their electronic devices to silent mode and make sure that you all have a copy of the findings and recommendations that the task force is going to be reviewing this morning. Let me explain what is to come. After this particular meeting, any corrections that the task force wishes to make to these findings and recommendations will be made. It will be put up on the department's webpage for the Fire Safety Task Force. A link to that is on the agenda. My email address is also on the agenda for the Fire Safety Task Force. The ordinance that created the task force requires us to submit a written report to the Board of Supervisors shortly after our last meeting. So that will occur probably within the next at least 30 days from today. This will allow everyone who wishes to review the findings and recommendations to make comments that we will include in the written report in an addendum. The report will have essentially three different sections. The first will give the Board of Supervisors what the requirements are for sprinklers and fire alarm systems and other fire safety mechanisms within current multi-unit buildings within the San Francisco Fire and Building and Housing Codes. The second section will include the findings and recommendations of the task force, which also includes input and perspectives of tenants, landlords, and the business community, which is the document you have before you. And then the third section of the written report will be an addendum that will include any written comments from any of our stakeholders and any additional documentation or correspondence that has been received through the course of the task force. So that is basically what the written report will be comprised of. So with that, we are on agenda item number 3, which are the findings and recommendations. And what I'd like to do is briefly talk about the content of this, which will be actually the middle section of the final report. It itself has 5 sections. The first addresses immediate measures that the task force and the stakeholders who have followed the task force have identified. Section 2 addresses interagency fire safety education and code enforcement. Section 3 addresses the City and County of San Francisco post-fire investigation and interagency information sharing, and that's chiefly between the fire department and VBI, but there are other factors as well. Section 4 addresses fire alarm systems in existing multi-residential unit buildings, and Section 5 addresses fire sprinkler and suppression systems in existing multi-residential buildings. And by multi-residential buildings, we mean multi-use buildings, essentially apartment buildings, which are 3 units or more. And the codes apply to buildings of various sizes within that building code classification. So with that being said, I'd like to then have the task force and our stakeholders take a look at Section 1. The current findings, we have 5 findings for Section 1, and the city and county recommendations there are 5. And I'd like to make one correction with respect to recommendation number 4 in Section 1, and that is, in addition to the PUC, DPW, the Department of Public Works, will also be included within this particular finding because they also have jurisdiction over road cuts when infrastructure is being updated. So that's a particular change there, and so with that, I'd like to have the members of the task force look at the findings and the recommendations of Section 1 and give us some input on that. We'll take a moment while everyone has a chance, if they've not already, to look at Section 1. Also, with respect to recommendation number 5, Dan Lowry, did you have some things that you wanted to add to that? With respect to the accessibility of roofs as far as fire blocks?
Yeah.
You might want to read that into the record.
Okay, for item 5, fires spread quickly in older multi-unit buildings that typically have open attics with no fire blocks. One of the recommendations would be that if there's access to the attic but 24 inches or greater, that we would provide drop stops, blocking, or fire insulation.
Thank you. Okay, does any other member have any other correction or question regarding, let's just take the findings first. Section 1, the findings, is there any changes that any member would like to make to any of the findings in Section 1 at this point in time? Or are there any questions regarding the findings of Section 1?
I have something, Rosemary. Rich Brown, San Francisco Fire Department. In Section 1, CCSF findings, item number 3, page 2. Current fire code
Thank
only, you got that? The current fire code only requires annual UL certs for multi of 16 units or more. It's a little bit more in depth than that. Brand new fire alarm system panels require UL regardless of size of units.
And we should probably clarify that alarm systems are required in buildings of much smaller size than 16 units. In the housing code from the mid-'80s, an apartment building of 3 stories or more that had 5 or more dwelling units required a central alarm system. And for hotels of 6 guest rooms or more, it required a system. And then in the fire code, alarm systems are required for what size buildings?
So in the California Fire Code, it is the 16-unit requirement. However, San Francisco Building Code, which also we follow, fire department, is more than 6 units.
Thank you. So we have the housing code and the building code requiring the a building much smaller than 16 units for an alarm system for new construction or existing buildings, which is the housing code is retroactive to buildings of a certain configuration and size of 5 units or more. Okay, thank you for that. And so with that, are there any other clarifications or anything else that the members wish to address with respect to findings 1 through 4? Excuse me, findings 1 through 5. With that, there being none, then let's go to the recommendations 1 through 5. Now, for housekeeping purposes, we're going to go through this, and then ultimately at the end, we will entertain probably a motion for what to adopt. At that point, I will open this up for public comment. So what I would advise our guests here is if you see a particular finding or recommendation that you have an issue with, that you want to testify to, make that note, and we'll definitely give you the opportunity to do that when we get to public comment for agenda item number 3. So again, we're at section 1, which has 5 recommendations. I'm going to have the members take a look at that, see if they have any recommended changes or questions other than what we've already read into the record regarding items 4, recommendations 4 and 5 in section 1.
Comment.
So we have a comment. Yes, thank you.
Do you want to?
Microphone, please.
Good morning, David Briggs with the PUC. Rosemary, do you want specific comments on number 4 or just the general ones that you already referred to?
I think that's good. I think adding DPW, unless you have something specific you want written in, we'll modify this to make sure that we include DPW.
Yeah, there's a couple of other
Sure,
word
absolutely.
changes which I can hand to you or read.
Sure, you can read those into the record, and then we can follow up with you.
This won't take too long. So my suggestion for number 4, at the time a business license is issued to the building owner for rental of multi-unit parenthetical apartment buildings, the link to the DPW webpage should be provided showing the street location of scheduled infrastructure improvements in the public right-of-way. The information should inform a property owner who wishes to voluntarily upgrade their fire sprinkler system of potential cost savings associated with installing these upgrades at the same time of infrastructure improvements in the public right-of-way. That'd be my suggestion.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this particular item? It's recommendation 4, section 1. Are there any other questions or changes that the task force would like to make to any of the recommendations in section 1, that being 1 through 5 at this time?
You know, this is John Bozeman with Bowman. I'm sorry I'm not there, but I don't have access to the documents that you're looking at. Is there any way that someone can send that to me and I can review it with you?
Yes, what I'm going to do, John, is I'm going to have someone step out of the office, go back to our office, and email you a copy of the document.
Can you fax it right from here?
Yeah, if we can. If we can fax it, we'll go ahead and do that.
And in fact, if it's something I can review and provide comment later, I'm happy to do that as well. I don't want to hold up the meeting.
Yeah, we can do it either way. We're happy if we can try and do that now. As I said, you'll have an opportunity to comment on the document once the action is taken by the task force. Right now, we're just looking at this. This may not be the ultimate version of it, depending upon what the motion is ultimately. But we'll try and do that. If not, then you will definitely have an opportunity to take a look at the document that the task force does take action on.
And then that's fine, no rush at all, as long as I get a chance to look at it after this meeting.
Yes, you will have that opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that,
In
Dan
item
Lowry?
5, I just want to clarify what I said earlier, that San Francisco Housing Building Code should be amended to require multi-unit building owners to install fire draft stops. It would be my recommendation, blocking or fire insulation, which is rock wool. Some areas may be hard to install blocking where the rock wool will suffice. Within 24 inches in height or greater when performing building alterations. We figured 18 inches would not be accessible enough, 24 inches should be accessible to hopefully draft stop the areas there to help prevent the fires from going to the attic and spreading to the whole building.
Thank you. Any other comment from members regarding section 1? Okay, so what I have are amendments to finding number 3 and recommendations 4 and 5. So now let's move to section number 2. We have, for section number 2, which is interagency fire safety education and code enforcement, there are 9 findings. There are 3 tenant perspectives, 1 landlord perspective, and no particular recommendations from the task force on this other than the findings at this point in time. So I'd ask you to take a look at the findings initially. Let me know if you would like to make any changes to that, or if there are any other findings you want to be added at this point in time. Again, we're on section 2. So does the membership have any additions or any comments or clarifications they want made to section number 2, the findings, which is 1 through 9?
Section 2.
Section 2.
Section 2 for the fire department, clarification on item number 6.
And this is the finding number 6?
Recommendations. And the recommendations,
Okay, we're still on the
Excuse me.
findings. So does anybody have any clarification or comment on the findings of section 2? There are 9 findings. And there are no recommendations.
Yes, number 6, I'm sorry.
Okay, so that's,
Sorry, Rosemary.
okay, great.
Yeah, Rich Brown Fire Department.
Okay.
So number 6 should read something to the effect that SFFD issues notice of corrections, which are correct, that statement. We also issue notice of violations.
Okay.
Based on the severity of the infraction, typically fire alarm, sprinkler out of service, and exiting issues.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and modify that. Any other comments on the findings in section number 2? And the rest is tenant perspectives and landlord, and when we get to public comment, if there's any other perspectives on that, or we'll leave that to our guests to address. Okay, then let's move on. If there's nothing else within section 2, let's go to section 3, which is the City and County of San Francisco post-fire investigation and interagency information sharing. We have 4 findings. I'd ask the members to go ahead and take a look at this and give us your comments and input. Okay, so with respect to Section 3, findings 1 through 4, does the task force membership have any comment or clarification regarding these findings? There being none, let's then move on to the Section 3 recommendations. We have 2 recommendations. Are there any comments or clarifications regarding those 2 recommendations? Or do you believe that we should add recommendations? If you do, now's the time. And we've already started work on some of this. Okay, there being none, let's move on to section number 4. Section 4 is fire alarm systems in existing multi-residential buildings. We have, in this section, 8 findings. And Robert, I want to thank you for all your work on this. So one of the things that we did here that you'll see from from the last meeting is we try to, where we could, quantify some costs. Obviously, there is not a one-size-fits-all. There's a lot of variables in upgrading systems, but where we could, where Robert could identify that criteria, we tried to include this. Please keep in mind that these are approximate figures, and every building is different, and so this is just an approximation as where you see costs. So does the membership have any clarifications or revisions or comments regarding any of the findings that appear in Section 4, fire alarm systems in existing multi-residential buildings? One of the things in looking at this section that I believe we will need to include will be a glossary of some of these terms, because some people aren't going to understand what they are. So we will go ahead and develop that for part of the report. Okay, so with that, again,
One
we're
more
on.
thing, just a quick clarification.
thank you.
Number 1, Rosemary, sorry about that.
No problem.
CCSF findings, number 1, it's really not so much a SFFD standard for the pillow test, it's an NFPA standard.
Thank you.
Just to throw another wrench into it.
Okay.
The new code cycle requires a low-frequency device now for sleeping units. So that'll have to come up later if they want something to do with that.
So we're going to need to get probably a little more language from you on this to be able to modify this.
That's correct, yeah. A glossary of
Okay.
terms is a good idea.
All righty. Okay, any other findings within section 4 that needs to be clarified, or any comments? Okay, with that, then let's move to the And again, we'll skip the tenant perspectives and the landlord and business perspectives. That will be addressed if the guests wish to during the public comment period. Let's then look at section number 4, the City and County of San Francisco recommendations. For this section, there are 3. And so obviously in recommendation 1, we would want to include the, instead of saying standard, we may need to clarify the NFPA. So we will make a note on that.
These will also require a building permit if they do this.
Okay, is there any other comments or clarifications with respect to the recommendations within section 4, aside from what has already been indicated in recommendation 1? There being none, we will then move to section number 5, the final section of the findings and recommendations. It is entitled Fire Sprinkler Suppression Systems in Existing Multi-Residential Buildings. This has eight findings, and finding number 8 has subsections to it. And there is then one recommendation within this particular final section. So I would ask you, because this is probably the most technical in nature of all the sections, to take a moment to go ahead and look at the findings. And then let me know whether you have any clarification or comments on those. And Robert, you did a great job in helping gather all this information. Thank you. And as my comments before, anytime within this section you see amounts, cost amounts, again, keep in mind that these are approximate and are subject to change from building to building, since one size does not fit every particular building. There could be factors that would increase costs that could not necessarily be contemplated within our findings and recommendations. David, I know that we mentioned in some of these findings the PUC. Do you have anything that you wish to clarify or any changes you would like made in any of the findings? I know that 8 does mention the PUC, especially subsection A.
Yeah, can you pass the mic?
Thank you, Dave Briggs. Yeah, so a few changes to number 8. Do you want me to just...
Sure, if you could read them.
Here, or-
Absolutely,
okay,
thank you.
Okay, 8A, I would rephrase as the PUC fire service connection, which has a flat rate for straightforward connection of $28,000, which can increase to $150,000 in extreme cases, Where the water service needed is located far away, the street in question is busy, expensive surface restoration is required, I would replace that with where you have moratorium cut, or the water main in question is not big enough, or other complicating factors. Under B, if we're following, am I going too fast, or?
No, that's fine, because it's being,
recording?
right, exactly.
B, letter B, under 8. In some cases, finding space for the backflow prevention device approximately the size of a large desk may increase cost for interior modifications in order to ensure the distance does not exceed 25 feet from the water main, period. The cost of the device itself is approximately $1,500. And I've got a question under letter D, but I'll just confer with Rich and Dan after the meeting on that. Those are my comments.
Rich, so the size of a small desk is that accurate, or should we describe it a different way?
That's fine.
Again, our audience is the board and others who might not know exactly what the size is, so we were trying to capture in a way that would be meaningful for the uninitiated. Okay, so we started with the PUC. So does the fire department have any additional items that they want clarified within section 5 as far as the 8 findings are concerned? I know that there's a lot here. Okay, I think we're then ready to proceed to the recommendations. So there is one recommendation in section 5. Have you take a look at that, see if you want any changes to that recommendation.
Chair, or maybe over here.
So with that, that concludes at least going section by section through the findings and recommendations. So with that, I invite the task force, are there any other findings or recommendations that you would like to see within this document that are not here currently? Captain Jones.
Maybe right now. Yeah, I'm looking at this recommendation. It's a little bit vague and a little bit redundant. And the reason is, it says upgrading fire alarm systems should be considered a consensus approach while post-fire investigative reporting is reformatted. I'm not sure what that means. To provide more specific information regarding the causes of fires. Well, we already have lots of that. NFPA does studies, there's all kinds of statistics about the cause of fires. Is that specific to San Francisco?
She needs the mic just because we're recording it. So Captain Jones, so
That seems very vague.
part of the discussion throughout all the different meetings had to do with the fact that, well, there is some data gathering. It's not necessarily transparent. And when the fire department's doing its investigation, depending upon what evidence is available, you don't always know, but they're focused on certain things and not necessarily how did certain systems within the building behave. And so we're kind of looking more for an emphasis of that possibly in the future, and then to take that data from the fire department with data that DBI has as to construction type, number of units, numbers of floors of occupancy, the affidavits that say the housing division would have on file as far as the central system, and put that together so that there is more comprehensive data towards what's happening in buildings so that we can look at patterns of failures, especially regarding the retroactive systems that are required, say, for an existing building in Chapter 9 of the Housing Code, et cetera. So that is why this recommendation reads the way it does, also because the consensus of the individuals here brought forth a lot of issues with respect to the cost to retroactively sprinkler buildings, possible relocation issues, and then the environmental factors as we've mentioned in the findings. So that's where we are here and why we have the recommendations that there are at least being proposed with respect to the alarm systems.
Okay, I was just hoping that it would be a little more specific for people who haven't been to all the meetings.
Well,
I mean, do we think that we're going to find data that is not consistent with national data of what causes fires, what kind of construction performs best, how life safety? How life safety systems perform?
Well, hopefully what we will get is some sense of if a fire system failed in an apartment building during a fire, we can then take that, such as the alarm system didn't work or people couldn't hear it, and take that information with the type of building, the number of units, the numbers of floors of occupancy, and start looking at that. That's what we don't have. We don't have that data brought together. And there seemed to be an interest in being able to do that, and indeed the departments have already started to have that discussion.
Specific to San Francisco.
To San Francisco and the current housing stock that we've got, which the prevalence of the apartment buildings we're talking about are much older buildings. They're not new construction, so they have older systems. And very little in the way of sprinklering. So that's hence why we have this recommendation. So with that, is there any other comments or clarifications that the members wish to make to this document in either sections 1 through 5? And if there are none, then I need a motion on the floor as whether or not you want to send this with the revisions that have been read into the record to the Board of Supervisors as part of the overall report. And then once I have that motion, if I get that motion, the second, then we will stop at that point and take public comment. So is there a motion to do that?
I motion to accept.
Okay, and do I have a second?
I second it.
Okay, so it's second from Deputy Director Lowry. So with that now, I will go ahead, and again, we are on agenda item number 3. I will open this up for public comment. And from Nicole or Matt, we do have a microphone for you. We would ask you to speak into that because we are audio recording this particular meeting, and I believe the lady there would like the microphone.
I'm concerned about the fires in the Mission and in the substandard building, and especially in the, it's a fire safety matter, but it isn't a matter of alarm. I don't want to bother you if you don't want to talk about anything except the alarm. But I have a concern about fire safety that I can express more specifically if you consider anything except the alarm. There are other things besides the alarm that make for fire safety.
Thank you.
Will you give me the information, please? The question is, whether you're open to a concern about fire safety in these buildings that have caused a lot of problems in life and property. Are you willing to consider something other than the alarm itself? Or do you want to limit to alarms, in which case I wouldn't talk?
Okay, this is public comment. We cannot respond to you. However, if you do look at the document, it does make other recommendations. So with that, do you have any other public comment that you would like to make to the
Yes, I
task
do.
force?
I was concerned about a new building that was completed last year, not an old building that might not comply with present recommendations in the building and the building and housing codes. But this matter of dual access from bedrooms. And I see that there seems to be two standards, one for the affordable units, which doesn't have two exits, including the window to get out at a proper height and openable from the inside. And this certainly decreases the possibility of people being safe and their property being safe if there's two exits. But there is a form on the internet for people to make complaints about windows, but that's after they become tenants. And before they're tenants, they're told, well, you have no standing if you're not yet a tenant. But suppose your desire for the apartment is limited to ones that have the dual exits that meet the building standard. And besides, if you become a tenant, you have to sign waivers for the injuries caused by the property owner's negligence. So you have no standing after you accept the apartment, and you have no standing before you get the apartment, and the city is not concerned until you have to sign these waivers for any prevention of denial of two exits, not just the one into the hallway. Also, I'm concerned about the elevators. This new building on Golden Gate had a tiny elevator, and you're told not to use elevators in a fire safety situation. And what about the stairs and the people that would have walkers? This is a building for very low income seniors. When I asked to see the building inspector's papers, and it had a stamp from the fire department, but when I pointed out these things, the inspector went away and said, wouldn't talk to me anymore. He said there's nothing in there that has any reference to the requirement of two exits from a bedroom. These are limited space places, and they have lighting not from the top, where ordinarily you want to see things down below, but great panels on the sidewall that attract your attention, but not to have any meaning to it. Now, it seems to me that the deterioration, accelerated depreciation of human life is encouraged by this kind of a situation. Why is the standard of two exits from a bedroom or an apartment not existing in these low-income apartments? I want an answer to that question, and I think I'm entitled not to a big conclusion of your body, but have some information about why they have a separate standard for fire safety in regard to exits and regard to other things besides the exits. I mean, the elevators, for example, how many people they carry? Can they take people down more than 5 at a time when the building has nearly 100 units? I think the exits from the building should be here, even if there is a fire, but there can be some other need for egress in a hurry.
Thank you. If we could keep people to at least 3 minutes, if you need to take a little more time, I'm rather liberal with that. The next speaker, please. Again, we're taking public comment on agenda item number 3. Tommy, did you want to go next?
Yeah, so I can comment on each of the items?
Absolutely.
Okay. So in section 3, in the recommendations, I would add something about the fire report and the tenants, because we sometimes at my office hear complaints from tenants who've been in fires that it's difficult to get a copy of the fire department's report, the fire inspector's report on the condition of their apartment and whether it's habitable, when they can return, how they can get their possessions out, because sometimes landlords won't let them in to get possessions. I think we need to just look at that area of how available are these fire reports to tenants and how can we make them more available and make them available quicker, because we hear complaints about the time lag between the fire and when the tenant can actually get a copy of this report. And just the whole issue of the tenant being able to get in and access their possessions and know whether their apartment is habitable. Because sometimes landlords will just automatically say, your place is not habitable, you can't move back in there. And maybe the fire report says something different. So I think that's an area that needs to be looked at and maybe some recommendation come up with under number 3. Under number 4, under tenant perspective, this is section 4, section 4, under tenant perspective, I would look at some right of the tenant to know the condition and workability of the fire alarm system. Because right now, I don't think we have a right to know that. Certainly you can ask your landlord, but I don't know that the landlord has any obligation to tell me as a tenant, what is the condition of the fire alarm system in my building? What is the plan for evacuation? Perhaps we need to look at the possibility of some kind of annual report from the landlord to all the tenants in the building. Just a simple letter informing them on if they've done a test of the system, what exactly is the condition of that system, and the plan for evacuation if it's changed or whatever. And then the final thing is in the last section on the sprinkler systems. Under recommendations, there's no section for tenant perspectives, and I would add a tenant perspective that would talk about a pass-through. What's going to happen if this does go through? I'm assuming there could be a pass-through, and what will that pass-through look like? What will be the cost? Is there going to be a limit on how much can be passed through? Like right now with capital improvement pass-throughs, it's 50% if it's a building of 5 units or more. Would it be 50%? How much time can the tenant be displaced for? Under current law, if you're displacing a tenant for capital improvements, it's up to 3 months and has to be renewed if it goes beyond 3 months. Would there be a hardship appeal on the part of the tenant? I'm assuming there would be, but I think these are all questions that would need to be looked at in a tenant perspective on the fire sprinkler section.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, good morning. My name is Leticia from Causa Justa, and I wanted to look into section 2 under tenant perspectives. Again, just wanted to echo on number 2 here, provide an online system for tracking SFFD code enforcement actions and notices of violation. I just want to say again, this would be really helpful to have. I know as of now, like if I'm working on a repairs case with a tenant, sometimes, if I don't hear from someone for like a month or so, I'll just go directly to the DBI data tracking complaint process and see what actions have been taken, and that would answer some of my questions regarding the status of like a case of a repairs issue. And so that would be really helpful to have. And also just want to echo the interagency communication, right, between the fire department and DBI and other agencies, which can include the fire department forwarding inspection results to DBI. So just wanted to say that.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I forgot to give my name before when I spoke. So I'm Tommy Albicoli-Mecca, and I'm with the Housing Rights Committee, for the record.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Diana Flores with Causa Justa Just Cause. Thank you again for this process. So we, as tenant providers, definitely appreciate the recommendations being considered for the tenant's perspective, and want to echo that currently, although there is a system to have access to the records, the storage address is still limited by 2 addresses if it's only by appointment. So we definitely want to encourage these files, whether there be the fire incident reports or any other records relating violations, to be accessible online. We also frequently use the San Francisco Property Information Map that is compiles through the Assessor's Recorder's Office, multiple complaint tracking, building permits, and as such, this would be an efficient place where maybe this record in terms of the conditions of a building in regards to fire prevention live. We also recommend that the current fire inspector phone list and district map aim to try to be more transparent and identify if there's a district inspector for a particular area. And so this is aligned with the consistency that we want to see amongst all agencies in order for us to have direct contact with y'all and also be able to do follow-up in where it's needed. Again, we echo the need for there to be a similar accessible complaint tracking system for the San Francisco Fire Department. We do believe that penalties should be imposed more frequently, and penalties right now, the section 109.4 of the 2010 Fire Code says that you may prepare a written notice of violation. And we just want to encourage the change into perhaps should or could, and also make sure that we are consistently making use of the remedies available under SF Fire Code section 109.3. We also know that there is a system in place for a director's hearing within the fire department, but we would like to see a more consistent use of this remedy also, and also schedule it in order to have a similar result as a DBI hearing process, which means the imposition of liens, the imposition of penalties, and a reconsideration of the allowance of time between a hearing and the time in which a fire code official might promulgate the procedures after the hearing. And currently, there's some relationship that exists between interagencies, the fire department and DBI. We recommend that records for incidents that are under investigation, although they might not be released to the public, we do recommend that there be a consideration for these findings to be shared within interagencies, even if they're not available to the public. So I know that currently there's, if you have referrals between interagencies, there might be fees associated with that. We also recommend that that be reassessed if there's going to be a more extensive share of information between your agencies or encouragement of collaboration or referrals. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Tim Carrico. Couple comments. One, I'm confused about the 16-unit reference in finding 3 in section 1. I know we have panels in all size buildings certified each year, whether it's 6 units or 16 or whatever. So I'm not sure what that difference is. If you're talking about certification or some label on the panel itself, if there's a difference. I've never noticed a difference in the panels in a 6-unit building or a 30-unit building that were installed in the 70s and 80s. My recollection, too, was that it wasn't for 5 units or more. They were required in 3 units or more that had common hallways. And if you didn't have a common hallway, then you put hardwired detectors in each unit that weren't on a panel. But maybe there was a 5-unit thing in there. But my recollection is the trigger for the panels was a common hallway. I'm very glad to see that the PUC you put in about doing hookups, but hopefully that means there's going to be some program set up where if you find out there's a new water main being put in, you can get a cost quickly and the contractor will be ready and able to install that hookup. That's going to require some work at the PUC to have that available, because when I've tried to look into that, it was kind of a brick wall at the time. And then I'd like more clarification about the attic space. I think that's a good idea when it's possible. And, you know, whether the rock wall does it have to fill 100% of the space so there's no air? Can that be done? Can it be blown in 100%? There was a mention of emergency lighting, which I think is a great idea, but it's not required that I've ever heard of in most older buildings. And I don't know if in fires that's much of an issue, if the power goes out to a building. But I know after the '89 earthquake, there were some very dark buildings at night. It was really hard to see your way around. And I think there was one other comment. Oh, with the sprinkling, I would like to see it over time, the city develop maybe a program for incentives for voluntary sprinkling. And the officer from the fire department was talking about it. It seems to me that fires probably spread in some common ways. And if the city could develop a program saying, you know, sprinkling light wells, maybe sprinkle heads in these attic crawl spaces. Is partial sprinkling I could be wrong, but there may be partial sprinkling that would be much more affordable that could, you know, have a 50 or 60% benefit, where 100% sprinkling is horribly expensive, and it would be wonderful if everything was 100% sprinkled, but the cost benefit is you know, pretty bad. Where partial sprinkling, maybe the cost benefit would have a good payback, but you know, that would require expertise of fire experts and, you know, what could be done, light wells, attic crawl spaces, back stairs, egress, you know, all that stuff that it could be done from the exterior and not that expensive. But I'd love to see the city develop, you know, ideas and recommendations that maybe could evolve over time, and, you know, people have an incentive to do that, because there might be insurance benefits for owners and that sort of thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Jadma Noronha, and I am with the Mission SRO Collaborative. I also second what some of the tenants groups talked about, having a, you know, interagency communication between the fire department and DBI during the investigation, sharing the post-investigation conclusions with the tenants, as well as having a fire department that's a little more aggressive with not only, you know, my issue corrections of violations, but actually like change the language to issue, and a violation for landlords that don't follow through with some of the fire code. And one thing that I wanted to add is in section 2, number 4, we do provide SRO education. We provide fire prevention education. DBI have a contract with the fire department. And what we are seeing in a mission right now with the housing crisis is small residential, you know, RN1s being used and operated as SROs, which increase the challenges of having basically each tenant using a room of the house as an individual unit, sharing the kitchen, increase the stresses on the electronic, on the electricity, on the plumbing, and all of that. And when we try to work on prevention on those dwellings, the fire department does not go because it's not on a contract. So if we can also start doing the fire prevention on this, I don't know if you can call like informal SROs, that will be very important, because I feel that some of the fires that have happened in a mission happen in locations where they were being, even though, you know, they were a little, they were being operated almost like an SRO, even though they were different buildings or apartments or houses.
Thank you. Next speaker. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak regarding public comment on agenda item number 3? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to send forward the findings and recommendations with the clarifications that have been read into the record. We will also add, do our best to include the tenant and landlord perspectives that have been identified here and put those into the respective sections. But I would also invite you, you have the opportunity within the next 30 days to, if you wish to submit anything in writing to us, which you can send to my email address or to send to us or hand deliver to us. And we'd be more than happy to incorporate that correspondence in Section 3 of the overall report that will be going to the Board of Supervisors. So with that, we have a motion and second, and all those in favor of the motion, can I have an aye? Aye. Any of those opposed? So then the motion carries to move this forward in the written report to the Board of Supervisors. And we will, as we finish with these recommendations, we will, and findings, with the corrections that were read into the record, we will get that up on the website within the next, probably by early next week. And again, I would invite anyone who wishes to give further comment, you have an opportunity to do so. And I want to thank you all for your participation. Thank you very much.